Hey everyone, I'm Nikki and this is Nikkie's channel. Today I'm going to be telling you guys how to study Korean with K-dramas. So I've been living in Korea for almost 4 years now. I'm advanced at Korean and I'm going to tell you a few different methods for learning Korean with K-dramas no matter your level. So I think K-dramas are very useful for learning Korean. There's a lot of everyday conversations that you can learn from it, and then of course if there's more specific sort of language that you want to learn, you can watch those sorts of dramas as well. For example, I've been watching Sweet Home because I think it is so important to be able to have that language in case our world falls into an apocalypse. Yeah, super useful.
What?
But on a real note, I actually do think there's a lot of words and grammar that you can learn from K-dramas that will be relevant to you and will be super useful. So I think it's a great method for learning Korean. Alright, so I'm going to present a few different platforms you can learn Korean with. And the first one I'm going to talk about is Netflix. But even if you don't have a Netflix account, please stay tuned because I'm going to be talking about my methods, which will apply to the other platforms that I'm going to present later on. Okay, so with Netflix, there's actually a language learning tool you can download for your browser, and I use it with Chrome. This language tool is free and it's called Language Learning with Netflix. Okay, so this is Vincenzo Season 1, Episode 1. I'll just show a tiny slice of it to show you these tools. Don't worry, there's no spoilers or anything like that. If you go down here, you will see that there's the Language Learning with Netflix button here. So you can click it to turn it off. And then, so let's just turn that back on. There's the setting button next to it. So if you click into that, you will see a bunch of different options here. So the Netflix audio language should be set to Korean. The subtitle language should be CC in Korean. So yeah, you have to make sure that there is the Korean subtitle option on Netflix before you can actually use that drama to learn from with this method. Then the translation language should be your language. So mine is English, but you can choose many different languages here. I haven't tried the other ones, so I don't know what they're like, but that's a possibility. And here there's the hide subtitles button. So there's a bunch of options here. Disabled, if you click this, then you're going to be able to see both the English and the Korean subtitles. So let's just check that out. Then let's play it. So as you see, when it's sound effects, they don't translate that into English. But once there is actually Korean, they translate the Korean into English. So here, it says Pyonho Sanim, and it's translated into sir. But does this Korean actually mean sir? Well, we can click on it to find the translation of what it actually means. And here you see it actually means lawyer, but it's just awkward to translate it into English as lawyer because we don't really say that in normal everyday English, but you do this in Korean. So they translate it as sir, but it actually means lawyer. So this is helpful if you're learning from Netflix. They also have a button to hear the proper pronunciation here, so you can click on that as well. And then there are some usage examples as well. And there's some pro features of changing the color and whatnot, but I don't really do much with that. Alrighty, so before I go into detail about this specific tool, I just want to quickly talk about the first method I would use for learning Korean from K-dramas, and this is for beginners. If you're intermediate or advanced, stay tuned because I'm going to be talking about those methods as well in a minute. So if you're a beginner, you can just listen, and if you hear a word being repeated a lot, for example, krom or kronika, well, you can just repeat what they're saying, echo them, and if you feel like it, you can stop, rewind, echo. Work on your pronunciation of these common words that you're hearing. And you can also go one step further if you like and record words or phrases that you hear a lot and present it to your tutor or your Korean teacher and ask them to teach you about this phrase. So as a beginner, I would just suggest learning the common things you keep hearing repeated in K-dramas. So actively listen. And there is passive listening and active listening. So you want to be actively listening to the language, because when you're in the beginner stage, it's really easy to tune out Korean and just be focused on the English meaning. Okay, so I'm gonna now go into method 2. So method 2 is for when you don't feel like actively learning. You don't feel like stopping what you're watching to write down things the whole time. You just want to relax a bit. Like maybe you had a hard work day or a hard school day. You just want to relax. You want to watch your drama. You don't want to think too much about learning. But at the same time, if you're at intermediate or advanced level, you can understand what they're saying. You've grown attuned to actively listening, and if you haven't, I would definitely suggest practicing active listening whenever you're listening to anything in Korean. Focus on the Korean words and the Korean meaning rather than just thinking in English the whole time. So, anyways, you're at this point where you're actively listening. So you want to put on both the English and the Korean subtitles together. Or if you're really advanced, of course, you just want to do the Korean subtitles. But if you're intermediate advanced and you're not ready to jump off into the Korean only world, you can have English and Korean subtitles on the drama and just keep it there. Read the Korean first, and if you don't know a Korean word, you can read the English underneath. So as I showed you before, you have hide subtitles as disabled, and then you press close. This is what's wrong with Secretary Kim, the first episode. You can see here there's both the Korean and the English subtitles. Now when I do this method, I sometimes find something jumping out to me that I'm like, oh, you know what, that's so interesting, like what they said there.
Fascinating.
Just in case there's something that jumps out to you, you can just write it down in your notes on your phone or write it down on a piece of paper and either look it up then if you feel like looking it up then, or look it up later. You can also just take a picture of the screen and the two subtitles there so you can look at it later as well. Alright, so method 3. This is when you're actively learning. What I do is, with this language learning tool, you can blur the English. So this is what I do. And when you blur the English, you can scroll your mouse over the English when you don't know the English. So I'll try to listen just in Korean and then scroll my mouse over the English when I'm not sure about the meaning. And then, of course, I write down words I don't know, I write down phrases I don't know, and I review those later. Okay, so once again, under hide subtitles, you have 3 options: disabled, hide translation, hide both. Press hide translations to hide your translation language. So mine is English in this case. And again, this is what's wrong with Secretary Kim. As you see, the English is blurred until I decide to scroll over it, and then I can see it unblurred. But if you feel like this is already too hard for you, I'm going to give you another method. Method 4, which a lot of people have used. Even Rap Monster has used this method. So if you're a fan of BTS or if you're a fan of Rap Monster, well, this is a method that he used. You pick a drama that you want to watch many times in a row. Maybe it's one you've already watched, or maybe it's one you're thinking of watching and you think you'd want to watch it multiple times. And first time you watch it with the English subtitles, you get the whole meaning of everything. But if you want, you can watch it with English and Korean at the same time. But you can pay attention mostly to the English if you feel like the Korean is too hard. Second time you watch with Korean and English, and then you're writing down the words that you don't know. You're writing down all the phrases you don't know. So you're stopping it many times to write all of these things down. You can do it episode by episode, or you can even do shorter segments, maybe 20-minute segments, 10-minute segments. It's whatever is at your level, whatever you're most comfortable with tackling. It will depend on how many words you know, how many phrases you know, what your Korean level is at. So be realistic with yourself with what is overwhelming to you and what is at your level, and go with that. So break it apart into pieces and learn those words and phrases in those specific pieces. And then rewatch it. Rewatch it until you know all those words, and then you can rewatch with just the Korean subtitles. And then if you really know it, turn off the subtitles completely, and bam, you know what they're saying. You know everything. This is very time consuming, obviously, but wow, you really get a lot. And one of the huge benefits of learning from K-dramas is you're learning within a context. These words are going to have more meaning. These phrases are going to have more meaning because they have a setting, they have situations that are attached to them. So for example, with some words and phrases I learn, I think back on the first time I learned it, where I was, what was going on, etc., etc. So the same thing is going to happen when you're learning these words and phrases with the drama. Okay, so you want to pick a K-drama that you really will want to watch multiple times in a row. So for you, what is the drama that you want to watch multiple times? What is the genre that you can watch multiple times and not get tired of? You have to pick very carefully what you're going to watch multiple times. And let me just say some of the benefits of learning from dramas. Number one, there's context. When you learn words and phrases in a context, they have more meaning for you. I think it's more likely that you're going to remember those phrases. And if it's with one of your favorite K-dramas, sometimes when you think of a word that you learned, you can think back on when you actually learned it. So it's going to have those positive associations. Number two, you're going to come across a lot of everyday phrases, and it's going to boost your confidence if you already know these phrases, because you're going to feel like, oh yes, my level is getting better and better. And if you don't know these phrases, this is the perfect opportunity to learn them because you will keep hearing them over and over again. And number three, if you are beginner, this is going to help boost you to intermediate. If you're at intermediate, this is really going to help you boost to advanced, which we all know that jump from intermediate to advanced is such a big one. It takes a long time to get from intermediate to advanced in Korean. And I think this method will help you. And if you're advanced, I mean, this is obviously a very fun, interesting way to practice your Korean and get better at it. Alright, so you're able to blur the English with this tool, and you can scroll your mouse over it to see it unblurred. You can also blur the Korean if you're very advanced at Korean. And once again, if you scroll your mouse over it, you'll be able to see it unblurred. There's also a command for repeating the last phrase they just said. So it is easy to go back through and repeat after the drama to learn the proper pronunciation for words and phrases. Okay, so if you go into settings, you will see the keyboard shortcuts. So you can go to the previous subtitle, repeat the subtitle, the next subtitle, or play or pause when you use these commands. And these commands are the easiest way, in my opinion, to navigate the drama while you're learning Korean through the drama. And if you go back to the drama, you'll see on the upper right corner 3 lines. So if you click on these lines, you will see all of the subtitles in Korean for the drama. And if you scroll over them, you can actually see the translation again. So this is another way you can use to learn Korean through the drama. Okay, so let's move on to another platform you can study on. Number 2 is Viki. Viki is actually a site that you can use for free, Or if you don't want to watch ads, you can subscribe to this site. And they actually have a learning mode tool that you can activate when you're watching a video on here. Even if you have Netflix, you might want to use Viki because there's going to be some K-dramas on here that aren't on Netflix. So it's worth checking out actually. Just like with the Netflix tool, you can click onto a word and you'll see the actual definition. So this is great, and you can use the same methods that I just mentioned that you can use with Netflix with the Viki platform. Of course, the actual commands for the learning mode tool with Viki is different than the Netflix language learning tool. Okay, so this is on Viki, and again, this is What's Wrong with Secretary Kim, the first episode. And like on Netflix, you can click on the word to see the actual definition when learn mode is turned on. But it doesn't have the usage examples and the stuff that you get with Netflix. You can click on this button to have him repeat the line that he just said. And then there's both the backwards arrow and the forwards arrow to navigate through the subtitles. On the bottom, you will see a bubble with 2 lines in it. Here you can change the subtitle language as well as turn on learn mode. Just note that not all shows will have the learn mode option. The third platform you can watch on is on YouTube. And there are actually these mini series, these mini K-dramas that are very short, like 10 to 15, maybe 20-minute episodes. And having such a short episode makes it more accessible to be able to learn and feel like that you've accomplished a lot by being able to learn those small segments. So I watch, for example, Playlist Global on YouTube, and I've learned Korean from some of those series on there before. However, there is a downside, which is sometimes they don't have the Korean subtitles, sometimes they only have English subtitles. This can make it more difficult to learn from. But there are some that have Korean subtitles, so you can find those if you need the Korean subtitles to understand what they're saying and learn those words and phrases. But if you can use the English subtitles or just hear what they're saying in Korean and understand the words they're saying, then that's great too. And the last platform I would say is also YouTube, but there are small little videos on some channels that are actually targeting people who want to learn Korean through K-dramas. So some of them take scenes from K-dramas and break those scenes down, explaining the meaning and stuff like this. And there are a few different YouTube channels targeting people who want to learn Korean from dramas, and so that might be a helpful resource. It's not something I kind of tried it a bit when I was in the beginner level, but at that point I was too early on to really find a great benefit from learning from K-dramas. When I was a beginner, I mainly just echoed the words I heard a lot, but I really think I got the most out of learning from K-dramas when I was further down in intermediate, and definitely now that I'm advanced, I think this is a great method for learning. Alright, so those are the ways that you can learn Korean from K-dramas that I have tried out. And right now I'm learning from Sweet Home, which I definitely recommend as a K-drama if you're into darker dramas or you're into horror or apocalyptic themed things. What K-dramas are you thinking of learning Korean from? Or what K-dramas have you already learned Korean from? I'm interested to hear. So please leave it in the comments below, and any K-dramas that you might recommend as well. I'm interested to hear. I've done videos about how to learn Korean and some tips and tricks for learning Korean vocabulary faster, as well as the grammar books I've learned from. So if you want to see that, you can click here. And if you're interested in finding out what I think the 5 best K-dramas are, you can watch that video here. Alright, thanks for watching everyone, and please hit that like button if you enjoyed this video and subscribe. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye!